Gaudi is an architect who's working in Barcelona, Spain, and you could argue that his style in some ways begins with Art Nouveau, and in some ways it parallels what we saw in France as well as the arts and crafts movement in England, but it evolves into something that is completely different and almost ahistorical, except that I would say that if you look at, for example, his Church of the Sagrada Familia, which he began in 1882 and which is slated for completion in 2026, you can see that he's inspired by a Gothic style. So on the right, I'm showing you Barcelona Cathedral, which was actually created in the late 19th century, or updated, and it uses these kind of pointed arches and the spires, which are typical of Gothic architecture. And you can see that some of that plays into Gaudi's work on Sagrada Familia. He also spent some time as a young man up at Montserrat doing some work, and there is a monastery there, and there are also these very interesting rock formations. And if you look at what he's done with these spires, the towers, it looks as though he's created something that reflects the landscape. There's a wonderful quote from Gaudi where he says, I am not a creator, I only copy. But yet his work is some of the most innovative, I think, that we have from the late 19th century. So if you look at the front of Sagrada Familia, it looks as though this concrete is like wet sand. And part of this revolution that could take place in architecture was due to the fact that metal, glass, and reinforced concrete, which had been rediscovered in the 19th century, were now useful. But he still creates something that's unlike architecture that we see almost anywhere else. So again, I'm showing you the landscape of Montserrat on the left, and this is one of the details where the spires are painted and it looks like the trees that are in the surrounding landscape outside of Barcelona. The interior, the nave, is also equally grand. It looks almost like bones, and the light is constantly changing. And as I said, the building won't be complete until 2026, but they have been holding Catholic services here since 2010. So it's a place that you can visit. When you look up at the ceiling, you can see the colors that come through the stained glass window and reflect onto these columns with these beautiful, rich lights that are just otherworldly and transformative. Gaudi is also an architect who did a lot of work in Barcelona. This is probably one of his most popular places. This is Park Güell, and it is done with little tile pieces. It has mosaic figures all over, and it meanders over a pretty large 45 acres to be exact, pretty large area that had originally been a residential estate and then was gifted to the city in 1922. You could almost argue that Gaudi is kind of a precursor to Salvador Dali, who's also a Spaniard and a surrealist. It definitely seems as though Gaudi is well ahead of his time and certainly very avant-garde as an architect in Spain.